All right, well, thanks very much for joining us today on the Special Chiefs Assembly and on Nation to Nation.
Thank you very much. It's an honor.
Now, I know that they're talking about this assembly is all about the final settlement agreement for a long-term reform of child welfare. Why is this so important at this period in time that maybe the Chiefs support the agreement, like in your opinion?
Well, I think that there has been so much work done in the area of trying to deal with, first of all, the rights of Indigenous children, but also the challenges we have in our own communities with regard to child and family services. There's sometimes disputes over jurisdiction. Sometimes there's jurisdiction over whose law should apply, and court decisions come into play and so on. So there's a whole myriad of issues that focus us on the essential question, what's in the best interests of the child? What's in the best interests of the Indigenous child? And that's why we're here to look at a new proposal to reform the process that we've been going through since child apprehension first began with the residential schools, I would say.
Exactly, and National Chief Nipanak Woodhouse mentioned that there is some urgency on this because of, obviously she's referring to the situation in Ottawa, which is ever changing, and that and she said there's some believe that this is that it's already the money is guaranteed in the budget. But why I guess with some of the things that are going on in Ottawa, might there now be some urgency to getting this agreement done sooner than later?
Well, the uncertainty, I guess, is in terms of a potential election, a change of leadership. But personally, I don't think that should come into the equation of what's in the best interest of the child. We need to be able to work with any government that gets elected so that we can actually get this done. And the more we can accomplish before an election, of course, that's better because that's secured, and we would continue it post-election.
And also, she did mention something pretty specifically, that really this money should be in the hands of the chiefs, not necessarily child welfare agencies, although they have an opinion. Why is that particularly important that these elected leaders are the ones that make the decisions, I guess, that's best for their communities?
Well, they have the best interest at heart, I think, in terms of their own members, and this time in particular to children. And I often think that we need also to think about the so-called disabled children. The children who are apprehended to off-reserve institutions or families. There's still disruption of the family going on, and I think that is more urgent in a sense of reuniting our families, bringing our children home, and then taking care of them in our traditional ways, for example, traditional parenting. Because now that's being removed, as I say, by disruption. Whether it's a political disruption, a legal court disruption, we need to recapture the jurisdiction of our own children and bring them back home and give them the emotional support that they need. Sometimes I've heard, for example, children say, well, nobody cares for me, nobody loves me, nobody hugs me. Well, that's a family bond emotion that's been severed in the past. And a lot of our work needs to be done to heal that harm. And who best to do it, I believe, is ourselves. Us as parents, as grandparents, as guardians, or great-grandparents. That responsibility essentially lies with us in the family. But then other issues like homelessness comes in. Child poverty comes into the equation. Mental health issues come into the equation. So yes, there's a lot to deal with. But in the urgency, I think it's been there in the past, but brewing over time by inaction. So if you recall the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that went across the country for 6.5 years, came out with a report with 94 calls to action. The first cluster of those calls to action are really about child and family wellness. So we now have proposed solutions to go forward with, and not just complaints. So let's implement these solutions that are being proposed by us, I should say, together with our neighbors and colleagues.
And the National Chief also mentioned that this is really a stepping stone. Now, it started out at 19 billion and it's gone up to 47.8 billion, which is quite an increase. It is record-setting, but she made the thing that this will be, part of a start, not necessarily the end. Why is that so important for, in your opinion, do you think that the Chiefs recognize that as well?
Well, I think one needs to ask, well, what's the alternative? What's the alternative to this proposal? And sometimes we don't hear enough about that alternative. So let's study this one carefully. Yes, it's not perfect. We'll look at the funding formula, we'll look at the governance structure, we'll look at the laws that need to be implemented through jurisdiction and legislation. So I said in my opening remarks myself, that I clearly remember elders telling us, go where there's no path and leave a trail for someone else. Well, the opportunity here is for us as chiefs to go where there's no path. There's a new proposal here. There's no path except the one we established together ourselves, and leave the path for our children to follow, our grandchildren to follow. So I think, yes, it is urgent from different perspectives. Money is one perspective, but that's not the only solution.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we have to leave it there for time purposes, but of course, always a pleasure, and really a pleasure to have you on Nation to Nation, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.